How are you? And welcome to another video from the Open Author. My name is David B. Lyons, and today I'm going to be discussing with you how I draft my novels. So I'm going to give you a breakdown of the different draft processes I go through in order to perfect, fingers crossed, a very decent novel. Okay, so I'm going to share that with you now in the next video over about 15 or 18 minutes. Why don't we get straight down to it? Okay, so drafting your novel. Now, here's the thing. Writing is such a subjective art form, and it feels a bit pretentious calling it an art form, especially coming from an author, but I mean, that's the truth, okay? So it is an art form, therefore there is no real set way that it should be done. In the same way that there's no set way that paintings should be done, because if every artist or every painter sort of took the same route to painting, well then anytime we visited an art gallery it would be a pretty boring experience, wouldn't it? Because every painting would look pretty much similar. In the same way that everybody who's approaching writing a book should approach it differently, because if we all did the same thing, well then, you know, visiting a library would be a pretty boring experience as well. So there has to be a different way for every artist, sounds pretentious, but every author to approach their work. But because so many people have asked me, and so many students over the years have asked me about the drafting process, my answer has always been, if I lined up 100 authors in front of you and was to ask them the drafting process that they go through, well then I'm going to get 100 different answers, because no two artists or authors, pretentious, no two authors go through creating their art, pretentious, the same way. And that they shouldn't. It should be different. But because so many people have asked me the question about the drafting process, what I'm going to do in this video is detail how I draft my novels, and then hope that you can at least take something from it to form your own drafting process for yours, okay? So I'm going to give you the 5 drafts that I go through before I think about sending my novels to my publishers or to my editor, and hopefully then you take something from this to carve your own way. So let's get through it. So in draft number 1, this is how I go about it. So if you've watched some of my videos before, you will have heard me saying this. Draft 1 is all about putting down the bones to your story. So it doesn't have to be a fantastic prose on draft 1. What you're doing is you're spending time getting your story down on paper, out of your head onto paper. So don't think that you're going to be, you know, like Stephen King, or producing fantastic work on draft number 1, because that's not what happens, and it doesn't happen to Stephen King, and it's not going to happen to you. I know I've used that line before many times in universities over the years, and I've used it in these videos, but draft 1, you ain't going to be Stephen King, okay? So don't put pressure on yourself to produce brilliance in draft number 1. Don't put pressure on yourself to even produce the best work you can do on draft number 1. So draft 1 is about putting the bones in shape, or in place, so you can build a model of a book later on, and we're going to go through that process today. So draft 1, I'm repeating myself, but draft 1 is all about getting your story arc down. So you want to get those 80,000 words down and write the end at the end of it, and then what you're going to do is you're going to go back over it and paint on all the color that's needed. So draft 1, still repeating myself, is all about getting the bones of your story down. That should be your only focus. Not producing great prose, not writing fantastically realistic dialogue, not about padding out your characters as best you can. It's not about, you know, nailing the tone of voice. It's all about just getting the story down. So if you have a story idea in your head, draft number 1 is just about getting that on paper. So it's just the skeleton draft. What you're going to do is you're going to build on that as we go through the drafting process. So for me, the first draft, I spend about 3 hours every day over the course of about 2 months writing draft 1. Now it is, as I said, it's not going to be your best work, but it is the slog of writing. It is what you will spend most time on, is draft number 1. So by the time I'm finished it, well then the easier processes occur or happen, and I'm going to go through them, as I said, in this video. But the first draft is all about getting that story down. So as I said, I work 3 hours a day for about 2 months to do that. So that's the sloggy part of it. And as I'm just spending the first 2 hours of that, I'm just writing and getting that story down, as I said. The other hour I will spend going back over it just to make sure that I have the story that I want. But I'm not changing my prose. I'm not improving it. I'm not improving my characters or my dialogue, because I know I'm going to do that in later on versions. So in draft number 1, get your story down, and then when we move on to draft 2, we will look at improving it, okay? So draft number 2 it's adding vital organs to your skeleton. So what we're doing here is, well, this is how I do it, but what I do here is I give it almost like a developmental edit or a structural edit. So what I mean by that is I'm looking out for any plot holes or any areas that could be improved in the story. So it's another story rewrite, draft 2. Now, as I'm going about this, I will also be cleaning up any technical errors that I spot as I'm going through. So any technical errors I left from draft 1, such as spelling or punctuation or grammar, or syntax errors, which is sentence structures. So, I mean, I won't be giving it a very good cleanup, but anything I notice, I will just clean it up as I'm going. But really what I'm looking to do on draft 2 is to really nail down that story, to find any plot holes or any improvements I can make in the story arc. So again, it's really just an improvement on draft 1. It's not cleaning up prose or putting a good clean or a good sheen on my story. It's just improving that story arc again. So draft 1, as I mentioned, is getting your story down. Draft 2 is for looking for any holes in that story that can be improved upon. So you've built a skeleton in draft 1, your whole story is down. In draft 2, you're just adding the organs as we look to make a perfect model of a book. So we're still not in great shape yet. We've still got somewhat a messy manuscript down by draft 2, but we have a good story. We're confident in our story. What we're going to do then as we go through 3 further drafts before we have a model of a book is we're going to clean it up. So let's have a look at what we would do in draft number 3. So draft 3, I have to say, for me is the most exciting of the 5 drafts that I go through. It's the most fun. It's characterization. Because publishers and agents will tell you this. There is nothing more annoying to them than a good story idea that has 2-dimensional characters. So what I'm doing then in draft 3 is I'm really adding a 3rd dimension to my characters, and I'm going to teach you some good tips and how I go about that. But what I'm trying to do now is, remember, I have a good story down. What I want to do is I really want to give believability to my characters. I want to make them 3-dimensional. I want to make my readers, when they finally get a chance to read this manuscript or this novel, I want them to be able to relate to the characters, whether that's to really like them or to really hate them. I want to give feeling to my reader about my characters. And this is how I go about this in draft 3. So this may differ for everybody. I write an awful lot of my manuscripts or my novels in first person. So the reader is inside the head of characters. So this tip lends itself particularly well to people who write in first person, but whether you write in third person, past or present tense, or whether you write in omniscient, all-knowing, narrative style. I do have another video on narrative styles, by the way. If you don't quite understand exactly what the different narrative styles are, we will go through that. But whatever style you write in, but particularly if you write in first person, the tips that I will give you here to flesh out your character, your characters, are really good. I really enjoy this process because it's quite fun. So we've built a skeleton, we've put in vital organs, and now what we're going to do is we're going to put the skin on top. So we're getting there towards building our model of a book. So in terms of characterization, I have a couple of different processes that I go through, and they are, as I said, particularly fun. So I will take out one character at a time. Now, you don't have to do this for every character. You'll do this for all your main players in your story. So you will take out, we'll just pretend that we're going through Midday, one of my stories, okay, one of my books. So this had 4 key players. There was 4 main men. There was Jack, Vincent, Dara, and Ryan. So what I will do is I'll take one out. I will take Jack, for example, and I will stay in his head for a week and go through all the parts of my story that involved Jack, and I would really paint him in. So I'll try and get inside the head of Jack, and I'll do this in a number of ways. But first, and for the main part, I will get into his head by using music. So I'll figure out what type of music Jack would listen to. Now, Jack happens to be a 55-year-old man who was raised in Dublin, so, you know, he would have been quite impressionable in his teenage years when he was in the mid-70s. So, I picked out a Bee Gees playlist, or a particularly funky 70s style playlist that I downloaded or put together on Spotify. I put the headphones on and I listened to that music for a week as I was drawing on Jack's character. And then I try and think of a voice that Jack would have in terms of tone and pronunciation, and I try and get into that tone of voice by listening to the music that I think Jack would be a massive fan of. And then, so whether I'm popping to the shops, I'm listening to Jack's playlist, or whether I'm in the car driving somewhere, I will put Jack's playlist on. And before I sit down and work, I will be listening to Jack's playlist. Now, I'm a typical man, so I can't do two things at once. So I wouldn't be able to write Jack's voice as I'm listening to his music. You may be able to do that. It's just not something I'm capable of doing. I need total concentration on just one thing at one time. I'm a man. So I will remove the headphones, and then I will go through over the course of that week, as I'm listening constantly to Jack's playlist, his role in my story, particularly the chapters that are told from his first person, and I will begin to write. And I swear, I promise, that's when my stories really start to become alive. It's when they start to impress me, even as the author of it. I can see my characters forming that third dimension that's really required. I can see them popping from the pages, from the Word document. And I know that when I finish the third draft, so I'll go through Jack, and then I'll do a playlist for Vincent and do the same thing, and Ryan and Dara, and I'll go through all my major characters in this third draft and really make the characters come alive in my story. So I have built the bones by writing out the story. I have added in the vital organs by adding to that story and improving the story in draft 2. And in draft 3, I've really made my characters come alive, or I've done the best I can to make my characters pop from that page and become relatable to you, the reader. So I now have the bones and the vital organs and the flesh built in. In drafts 4 and 5, I'm going to be adding the features and then to that model, and then I'm going to make that model look beautiful, and I'm going to tell you about how I do that. But draft 3 is all about characterization, and no matter what you take from this video, I'd like you to take this tip, that get inside your character's head as much as you can and build on a characterization draft, because it will really, really impress agents and publishers that your characters are three-dimensional, that they're believable, that they're relatable to a reader. So do take this tip on board in terms of one of your drafts. And then we get on to draft 4, which is adding those features to your model, okay? So giving them an eyes and a nose and whatever shit metaphor I'm making up here as I go along. But draft 4 is removing any bad habits from my manuscript. So I've probably got 80,000 words down now from draft 1, and then in draft 2 I improved the story. In draft 3 I improved all my characters and made them believable and relatable. In draft 4 I'm going to nitpick. I'm going to start deleting redundant words and sentences and phrases from the story. So any bad habits that I have taught my students over the years to get rid of, I'm really only getting rid of them now myself in draft 4. So even though I'm an experienced creative writing lecturer, and even though I've been an editor of 40 novels and an author myself, drafts 1 and 2 and 3 will still have an awful lot of the bad habits that I have taught people to get rid of. So I might have too many adverbs in my story. I will find as I'm going through it that doesn't need to be there. Boom, out you go, delete. So I'm actually editing out now. So if I had 90,000 words to begin with, at the end of draft 4, I'll probably have 80 or 82,000 words, because draft 4 is really where I'm editing out, not necessarily adding in. So I'm taking out adverbs, I'm taking out sentences that really are redundant. I am restructuring sentences because they don't particularly read right. So I'm doing a technical edit in draft 4. I am making sure that my story reads as good as it possibly can. So remember in draft 1 I told you, don't worry whether it's golden. It doesn't have to be great in draft 1. Get your story down. Draft 2 you're improving the story. Draft 3 you're making the characters pop. Draft 4 is where you're turning your manuscript into something really good. So you're looking at things like removing adverbs and not using too much dialogue and deleting all those redundant dialogue tags. By the way, I've mentioned all of these bad habits in other videos, so you can please take a look at those to understand exactly what I'm talking about. But really what I'm doing in draft 4 is I'm giving it a good sheen. I'm really cleaning up and making this become a proper novel. This can be quite taxing. It's not the most enjoyable drafting process. I mean, I don't mind it, and a lot of students over the years have told me it's actually their favourite. But what you're really doing is giving the gloss to the manuscript. You're turning it from your rough story that you've painted down. You're turning it into an actual novel now, something that a publisher wants to pick up. So draft 4, the cleanup. In draft 5, it's the ultimate cleanup, and I'm going to talk you through that now. So draft 5, we're turning our manuscript into a model. There I am there, looking good. That was just me at my holidays last year. It's not Zac Efron, it's me. So draft 5 is the ultimate cleanup. We are making this a model of a book now. We've cleaned it up in draft 4, and we're going to clean it up again, but we are going to clean it up predominantly from a writer's point of view. What is good? Out of all the lessons I've learned about what makes a good manuscript or a good novel, what is proper writing? So we're going to get rid of course, we're going to get rid of all the bad technical errors that we find. So we're cleaning up spelling and punctuation and grammar and all these technicalities. We're making sure our sentences are absolutely spot on. But really what we're doing is we're making sure the story is as good as it can possibly be. It's the final draft. We are painting on the makeup of our model. We are making her look as beautiful as she can possibly look. So the real key to draft number 5 really, and the difference between this and draft 4 is, because they're both technical cleanups and story cleanups, but this one, what I'll do in draft 5 is, because I'm happy enough with my manuscript now, but I will put it through a piece of software called Pro Writing Aid. Now Pro Writing Aid you can use for free, so check it out online. To get more nuanced, cleaner and more specific feedback from Pro Writing Aid, you can pay, but check out the free version of it anyway when you get to this stage, because what that will do, that will point out to me where I've overused too many words, or where I've used the sort of same sentence types consecutively. It will point out all these habits that are through my manuscript that will help me clean it up. So it's actually like a virtual editor for me. It will point out you've used the word truly way too many times, Dave, or you've used a first person pronoun beginning of a sentence too many times in one chapter, and I'll think, oh yeah, do you know what, I didn't notice that through all the drafts I've gone through. I haven't noticed that, and Pro Writing Aid will point out some habits to me that I would want to clean up. So I'll only do that in draft 5. It's easy to do that after draft 1. It's easy to do it after draft 2 or 3 or 4, but I wait until I'm really happy with my manuscript before I put it through Pro Writing Aid. And when I put it through that, I'll be able to clean up with the results that has given me, and then suddenly I have Zac Efron as a book. Okay, I have a model of a book and I'm ready to go. So draft 5 is when I will only seek the help of Pro Writing Aid, and then I will be really, really happy once I have fixed the niggles that Pro Writing Aid has pointed out to me. So they're the 5 draft processes that I go through. I hope you can take something from it. You may want to try and replicate this if you're writing your first book. You think, you know what, I'm going to take on board the exact same drafting process that bald open author guy taught me. Please do. Please take them on board and see if they work for you. You may think, you know what, I like his idea of just getting the first draft down and then cleaning it up in the second draft. I think his characterization thing with the music was a bit pretentious. I don't think that's going to work for me. I'm not going to do that. Fine, absolutely. Whatever you want to take from this video, take from it. But what I really, really want to do is get across the idea that there is a drafting process. It's not a case of just sitting down and writing out a story and thinking, you know, I think I'm going to send this out to be published. It's not how it works. you really need to work on it. You need to read your manuscript about 10 times at least before you're really happy with it. And you will, as you're going through the drafting process, you will be reading it as you're going on. So by the time you are finished draft 5, in my world, it could be draft 8 in yours, or draft 3, whatever processes you want to take with your drafting, you will have read it so many times that it should be very close to error-free. Now, of course, before it goes to be published, it will go through a very strict editing process. So you will need, whether you're going the self-publishing route or you're going through an agent or a publisher, you will need another eye on it to give it a final edit and a final gloss and glean. So, you know, when you're finished your 5th draft, if you follow my drafting process, it's still not done. You're still going to have somebody else's eye, and that's key. You can't just self-edit your own books. So that's a drafting process. I just done this video because I've been asked about it so much. But as I say, no two authors should be the same. We're all going to take a different approach in how we perfect our novels. So I want you to take that on board too, that you're going to find your own drafting process as you go through. But if you're a first-time novelist, you might take on board my process and replicate it so you can perfect your novel in the best way you possibly can. And then you might find your own way of doing it as you write more novels over the years. So that's the drafting process. I hope I haven't gone through that too quickly. There is a bit more nuanced and a bit more specific than I can get across in a 15-minute video or whatever this ends up at. I always aim for 15 minutes, normally go towards about 20 because I'm Irish. I don't shut the fuck up. But I hope it helps in some way. If you want more specific questions on the drafting process, do pop on my website, theopenauthor.com. There's a contact sheet there. Fire any questions you have away to me. Check out the rest of the videos on that website or on YouTube. They're all there too, under The Open Author. You can subscribe actually to the YouTube channel, and then these sort of things, these videos will drop into your account every time they're released, every weekend. So I hope this helps. I'll talk to you soon. Do pop on the website, get in touch, and I'm hoping you are progressing with your novel. Thanks very much.